My name is Helen Proudfoot, and I just really quite like this quote: "Increase your bike print in the world." And I mean, particularly at this moment, that seems to be quite a big movement. So I thought I'd start with that. So I've always been a very keen cyclist. It all got a lot better once I got rid of the stabilisers. I'm the sort of person, I moved to London because someone mentioned that it was quite fun to cycle there. And I've now moved to Oxfordshire, having got a job as a cycle tour guide, taking people around the Cotswolds. So yeah, they've pretty much led me around the country. And I've done quite a lot of little trips exploring the UK. The first one I did on my own was cycling from Ham to Sandwich, and that was just where I had 4 days left so I could take some time off at the end of the year. And I was just trying to find somewhere that were two places about 280 miles apart that I could cycle to, and just spend most of my lunch breaks staring at maps until I happened to find Ham and Sandwich. So I spent 4 days in December a few years ago cycling along the south coast, bivvying out every night in the cold. And then I got to Sandwich and found out that there's actually a little village just next door called Ham. So I could have done the whole thing in 2.5 miles, but you know, sometimes it just takes the adventure out if you do too much planning. So the next one I did Wellington Boot, and this time I actually went to all of the Wellingtons, all up the west coast of the UK, because I found out there were actually quite a lot of hams that I'd missed out, and I wanted to do it thoroughly this time. So I took these Wellington boots with me with my route planning there in case I got lost, and even went to the Wellington Arch in London before I started to see Wellington's original boots. This is the bike that I did that trip on, and the other one as well. It's an entry-level ridgeback hybrid, so nothing high-tech. I think it was just taking up too much room in somebody's shed, and I was just given it second-hand, so you don't need to spend a lot of money or anything on kit. This is up in the Hardknot Pass in the Lake District, just beyond Boot. And yeah, I was pushing my bike up the hill. It's infamously vertical. And a car stopped and the guy got out and offered to push my bike for me because it looked that steep. So there's some pretty good places to explore in the UK. Next trip I did, loads of people do source to sea, going down rivers, whether that's swimming or kayaking or stand-up paddleboarding. Now I thought it'd be more fun to do source to source. So it started in Worcester for the Worcestershire Shawls factory, Liam Perrin's there, and then headed down to the Houses of Parliament for HP sauce, which was so called because it was allegedly served in the dining room at the Houses of Parliament. So useless fact of the day. I've also done the Christmas dinner ride, which involved cycling all over London, starting in Turkey Street and then going to Pudding Lane, Cranberry Lane, Almond Avenue and Cinnamon Crescent, and all the other places that are named after the things you find in the Christmas dinner. It's a very cold, wet day, and you ended in a pub with a massive fire, and I actually had a Christmas dinner, which was well worth it. So yeah, you can just play around with maps and have a bit of fun with cycling. Then I've also did last Easter, over the 4 days of the Easter bank holiday, I tried to do the Easter Bunny, which is cycling from a tiny little place near Inverness called Easter to another tiny little village called Bunny down near Loughborough. So it was about meant to be 125 miles a day. And I managed to find someone in Inverness who was doing face painting, so she gave me a proper Easter little bunny on my cheek. The airs are not air ears. They are actually not that great when you're racing downhill and they're pushing back into the wind. Don't recommend them. So this is one of the places where I just slept out, overlooking the North Sea, just south of Berwick-upon-Tweed. And when you're just lying and sleeping on top of the cliffs and you wake up and you see the sunrise over the sea and just glinting through all the little dewdrops in the grass, it's pretty magical. You don't get that sort of view in a hotel. And then last summer I tried to do some serious cycling and joined in with the Transcontinental race. If anyone's actually interested in Transcontinental, you should listen to Anissa tomorrow, because she actually, she did it the year before me and did a hell of a lot better than I did. So that's going to be a very interesting talk. But yeah, you're climbing big mountains, it's up in the Dolomites, which is a little bit more of a challenge for me. I also did quite a big trip cycling various places around the world, and this is down in Patagonia. And this is the only time I've actually bought a bike. It's been a proper touring bike with all the bells and whistles. And I had my phone with my little GPS, and I was just following a little blue line. And I was thinking, it's a little bit too easy. I've just got all the best kit, and I'm just following a line, and it's not, yeah, like there's nothing that can really go wrong. And also, I was in these beautiful landscapes, I was thinking, why have I come to the other side of the world to see incredible landscapes? Maybe I should concentrate a little bit more on home. So yeah, I had this bike which did the job and was absolutely brilliant. I wanted something a little bit different. So I thought of this old bike, which my mother was given when she was a teenager, living out in a village in Essex. And she was given it secondhand. I think it's actually about late 30s, having done a bit of research. It's single speed, and it's got wheels, it's got mudguards, it's even got pannier rack. I did actually have it done up, so it's a picture of my mother on the bike, as well as me. So it does work, and but it's a sort of bike that's really hard to ride without a massive smile on your face. And I thought that's probably one of the most important things on a long cycle trip. And I wanted to try and do the whole thing with period technology to fit with the bike and build the whole journey around the bike. And the bike's a Raleigh. So I started in Rayleigh in Essex and then headed up to the old Raleigh factory in Nottingham. And here is my intensive route planning. It also includes various places where my mother, my grandparents and other relations have lived, places which I've always been interested to see but never actually been to, and lots of places with Raleigh in the name. Also, it happens to be in East Anglia, which is an area I don't really know that well and would like to explore. And it's fairly flat, which is quite important when you're doing single speed. So I made all my own, borrowed my own kit. So I made panniers out of canvas, then went around waxing them with beeswax, then found out you could buy pre-waxed canvas. Got a canvas bivvy bag, an old wool army blanket, converted my leather school satchel from when I was a little kid into a bar bag. Made some of my own clothes as well, scoured vintage shops for other bits. And yes, had fun trying to not find the best kit for cycling, but finding the most appropriate kit for the period, which is a completely different thing. So this is the first night. A few of us went and camped up at Hadley Castle, where it's just down on the South Essex coast near Southend, and it was really rather beautiful. So it's lovely to have a bit of company at the beginning of the trip as well. Here I am in Rayleigh, in Essex, with the bike, in my homemade shorts and my 1940s shoes and my slightly dodgy beret, and ready to start the trip. So I spent a lot of time actually just being a tourist and exploring and taking the time to see places like Aldborough and Southwold that I'd heard quite a lot about but never had a chance to see, and getting some nice classic tourist shots on my old 1940s camera. This is Rolling Green Cottage, where my mother grew up, and this is where she lived when she was given the bike. So I was taking the bike home as well as everything else, which was rather lovely. Then just outside that village, I saw the signpost, it has the village name, and it's a lovely old signpost. So I put my bike up against the sign to take a picture. When you've got a camera with a film camera, it just costs about £1 a photo to get photos. You actually start to think, why am I taking this photo? What is the value of this photo? And that's very different to just, when you've got a phone camera, you just take a picture of everything on the off chance. So it's kind of challenging the way you think as well. And anyway, I was there taking a photo, and then this big white BT van pulls up and says, "Oh, are you local?" I was going to say, well, actually, my mum grew up here, but I thought that probably wouldn't be particularly relevant to his question, so I said no. He said, "Well, can you help me?" He waved his sat-nav sadly out the window. "I'm trying to find Ratcliffe Farm, but it's not working." I was like, well, actually, I think I can. And I got out my 1948 OS map, found Ratcliffe Farm, and I was like, right, okay, so you need to take a left down there, then a right, and then left over the hill, and then you should be there. So yeah, old technology 1, brand new sat-nav 0. Yeah, so old technology does work. So the maps basically were fantastic, except occasionally when you found like bypasses, industrial estates, housing estates, and the odd nuclear power station that just didn't exist in the 1940s or 50s. And I love the fact that someone named a cafe Sizewell Tea. And the beach was surprisingly busy considering that its main feature was a nuclear power station. Then heading down to Harwich, I had to get the little ferry across. I tried to take as many ferries as I could because they're fun. I was cycling along in my 1940s gear, and I saw on the two little boats a sign saying Dunkirk 1940. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then the people on the boat saw me going past in my 1940s gear, and they looked out and thought, oh, we should talk. So I missed my ferry and I missed the next ferry, but I got their life stories and we had a wonderful time just sitting around the boats, having a cup of tea or two, and learning about the boat's history in Dunkirk and everything they did there. And these boats are often a little adventure to go and see, to go to a vintage boat show in Ostend with all the other little boats that are still going from Dunkirk, which is pretty exciting. And here's the crew who I'd love to chat with. This is another lovely couple I met. So this is Bob and Teresa, and their daughter had been travelling all over the world, and everywhere she went, she tell them about how she's given accommodation and food, and she's looked after. So they were more than happy to be able to repay that debt in kind, or not really a debt, but you know what I mean. And yeah, they made me lovely bacon butties in the morning, and yeah, absolutely lovely. And then this is the one for Enid. So I went down to Bradwell Windmill. There's so many windmills out in Essex and Suffolk. I have to go and visit at least one. So I popped in here, and Enid was telling me all about the time when John Craven came along from Countryfile, and she gave me some flapjacks. Oh, these are John Craven's favourite flapjacks. It's absolutely fantastic. And her two grandsons own a bakery and make cakes and breads using flour milled in that mill. And yeah, it's really lovely to be welcomed in. And I finally made it to Raleigh Street in Nottingham. So this is the site of the original factory where this bicycle was probably made. And yeah, it's brilliant. And in the middle of Nottingham, if you know it, there's a massive great hill. So I just cycled up this hill. I'm a little single speed, and my back tyre was a bit off kilter, so it was dragging on the wheel. So it's been a bit of an effort getting up this hill. And I got to the top, feeling quite proud of myself. And then a voice hails me out of a car. "Boy, are you Helen?" Well, yes. I said, "Yeah. You met our mates on a boat down in Harwich. I've been going on about you for ages." So yeah, it's a small world. It's a small world. This is a little illustration. So maybe one day, possibly, I'm going to actually put all of this into a little book and illustrate it in a style that might have been appropriate to that era. And this is the little map of where I went. And yeah, I'm kind of recording the places not by the traditional locations, but by the people I met there, because that's what's important on the trip. So the Raleigh Rally 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 involved one rally bicycle called Bertie, one happy cyclist, and lots of places called Rally. Together we broke the rules about having to have the best touring bike, the latest gadgets, and the shiniest lycra. Turns out all you need is a passion for cycling and a bike where the wheels go round a bit when you pedal. If you love the bike, that will make for a happy journey. If it breaks, you get to ask for help and meet new people. When your nose is not buried in your phone, strangers can talk to you. You're a human being once more. If you look a bit odd, even better, you've already broken the ice. Travel like you care about where you are, not where you're going. And if it doesn't rain for 2 weeks, you're on to a winner. This is just a little sign in, I think it's in Charlbury Churchyard, which I feel is rather appropriate. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so got a couple of questions on the chat. Wellington, there are 4 towns and villages called Wellington. And yeah, so there's one down in, I think, possibly Devon or Dorset. and then Herefordshire, Shropshire, and then the Lake District about 8 miles from Boot. When I was sleeping in the castle, so that was Hadley Castle, and I slept out. I just had my wool blanket and a canvas bivvy bag, and yeah, that was fine actually. Yeah, so there was one point, yeah, I think about 2 or 3 days in, I was in a pub in the evening, and I was getting a bit annoyed with my blanket, so I bought my little mini sewing kit and I just sewed up the side of it to make it into more of a sleeping bag. Which actually is quite nice because people then came up and talked to me, said, oh, do you know, I do lots of sewing. Oh, I own a curtain making service, and suddenly it became a talking point. So that was quite nice. My favourite bike, it would be a toss-up between that little bike called Bertie, just because it is impossible to ride without a smile on your face. Although you can't really go far or fast on it. It's good fun. Or it would be the 1985-ish Peugeot road bike that I ride all the time now. And countries I visited on my international trip. So I cycled through bits of France, Spain, Cuba, Argentina, Chile, New Zealand, Vanuatu, and Indonesia, particularly the island of Flores. And how do I conceive of these ideas? I spend too much time reading OS maps mainly, and just picking out interesting names of places that I might like to go, or just then trying to find links between the names. So there's a trip that I want to do coming up, hopefully in August, cycling between all the villages in the UK that I found called Hope. And so there's a Hope right up on the north coast of Scotland. There's one in the Peak District, one in Wales, and then one down in Devon. So it's looking like quite a good long trip. Cycling in Vanuatu. So we just cycled around the main island, Ifatu, and most of it is completely flat. And then there's one volcano which is almost vertical. The whole distance is about 160 kilometres as you go around. And I think we had about a week to do that, so we didn't travel very far each day. I think one day, the shortest distance I've ever travelled was in Vanuatu. Started in the morning at the Blue Lagoon, cycled 600 metres to a beach, and that was the day cycling. But yeah, people there were absolutely lovely, really friendly, and really beautiful. And although it was really hot, it didn't really matter because it was just a flat cycle. Did I have any issues getting my own bike into New Zealand? No, not really. They did take away, I'm not quite sure what the issues would be, but they did take at the check-in, they did take away I think it might have been the tent and our shoes to scrub off any soil that had come from outside New Zealand. I don't think they could face unpacking all the boxes that contained bikes and bits. They just took our word for it that we clean them. Can you still get the right spares for Bertie? Well, actually, Bertie, apart from the frame, is pretty much entirely brand new. So I had rebuilt at a place called August Handmade, where they specialise in refurbishing vintage bicycles. So it was quite tricky to get exactly the right parts that still fitted the bike, and the brakes that went on there, originally they were rod brakes, but now they're just normal cable rim brakes, but they're not that effective because it's impossible to get ones that are effective that fit on the bike. So it's a little bit problematic, but it's doable. My mighty tool is actually just a spanner, so it makes it quite fun. Yeah, cleaning. So the original seat doesn't look very comfortable though. So during the trip, the Raleigh Raleigh Rally, I think I averaged about sort of 30 to 40 miles a day, partly because I couldn't go fast because the pedals spin too fast, partly because I actually wanted to spend time looking around. I didn't want to be hurried, but mainly because it just wasn't really very, very comfortable, especially when you're just in cotton shorts. So yeah, there are advantages to Leica and so on and so forth. But I think nothing I really liked about the trip was I showed you don't need to have all the latest high-tech gear in order to do a bike trip. You could probably, whatever you have at home is probably much better than what I was using on that trip. And so yeah, you can go outward. What did my mum say about doing the trip on her bike? So I don't think so when I took it up and got it refurbished, I think it had been sitting in the shed for about, or sitting in the garage for about 30 years unused. So I think she was very happy to see it back in action. So that was good. To be honest, at the start of the trip, my main fear was that the bike would fall apart before the end of the trip. So I was quite happy that it didn't. How would you convince somebody else to do a ride like this? That's a very good question. Yeah, I think so. For me, one of the things I liked most about the trip was that I didn't have a phone with me at all. I didn't have any GPS. So it actually felt like it was a holiday from real life, far more than any other bike trip or holiday I've done, certainly recently. Yeah, so I think that could be definitely a selling point. I think it just meeting somebody who's got the right mindset, who thinks that this might be a fun thing to do, and maybe encouraging them to listen to a talk or just chat to me and hear about how wonderful it was. Did you meet people from the 40s who identified with the way you dressed? That's an excellent question. So I went to Bury St Edmunds, which, at least in my mind, quite a lot of elderly people lived there who could well have been alive in the 40s. And at one point I was wandering around, I had this 1940s dress, wearing my beret, I had a cape, and I had actually a genuine 1940s World War II army jacket. And I was wandering around thinking, people here think that I'm just taking the piss out of them. But they weren't. I think, yeah, then there's someone in the bar, a barman who I was chatting to, and he said, "You're not from around here, are you?" It's like, no. It's like, yeah, no, we don't get many people dressed like that in Bury St Edmunds. So, yeah, I think people did recognise it. And then when I was in Thetford, that's where they filmed a lot of Dad's Army, and they refilmed like the recent film there, and they had a cutout of Mannering in his army uniform, and I stood next to it in my bit of army uniform, feeling a little bit self-conscious. How long does it take me to plan a ride, and how do I go about planning? That depends a lot on the ride and what I want to achieve. If I'm trying to ride far and fast, I'll probably spend most of my time planning, trying to work out how many things I can take out of my bags and still get away with, and then planning the route and trying to make sure that all the routes I'm on are going to be tarmac, they're not going to be ridiculously busy, and they're not going to go up any unnecessary hills. So I just spend a lot of time on a computer moving dots around trying to make it work. For a trip like this, I spent a lot of time, I was reading, I've had books of Fashion on the Ration, so it was all about 1940s clothes, and so looking at the materials and the techniques and the styles that people would have been wearing and would have had available to them as well. I also researched when chocolate bars became available, so I knew which chocolate bars I would be able to buy and still be in keeping with the period. Yeah, and spent a lot of time searching on places like eBay, trying to find vintage clothes like this 1940s shirt, and tried to find vintage dynamo and things to put on the bike as well. Yeah, and spent a lot of time. I think then, because I was making a lot of stuff as well, that I think it probably took me a few months to plan it and get it together. The trip you're planning around London, how long will that take? So I'm planning to do, another trip I'm planning to do is do Land's End to John O'Groats, but not on that route. So I want to do that distance, which is 1,173 miles, according to Sustrans, but entirely in London on Boris bikes. I'm thinking it's going to take me at least 2 weeks because I'm going to be on a bias bike and I'm going to have to do the whole thing in 30-minute stints because that's how long you can take a bias bike out for before it becomes really expensive. Yeah, so I'm quite looking forward to doing that at some point. Do you have a luxury item with you on this trip, or is space too short? I'm not sure. I think that was the only bike trip where, because it was 1940s and you dressed up a bit more in the 1940s than you do now, it's the only trip where I actually had lipstick with me. So I used to put that on every morning. I do like the idea of having something with you at all times that is completely pointless and ridiculous. So when I cycled all around the world, I had my little ukulele with me, which I played about 3 times, but I always took it with me. And then when I was doing the transcontinental race across Europe, I had a little bottle of red nail varnish. And I remember just sitting in the traffic island in the middle of the road, painting my nails just to make myself feel a little bit more human, because everything else was, yeah, sweaty cycling gear. Are there any other questions? How do I cope with mechanics? So basic things I can do myself. So yeah, just dealing with punctures and tires and brakes and fiddling around with little bits. And yeah, you can go a long way with electrical tape. That saved me on many occasions. With Bertie, the little Rally, the tires on that are incredibly difficult to get off, and I just don't have the physical brute force to get them off, especially not at 6:30 in the morning when my fingers are frozen solid. So on that occasion, when I had a puncture and it was 6:30 in the morning, luckily there was an old guy cycling past, and because that's what people do, he said, "Oh, you're all right," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just need a bit of help getting the tyre off. I can do everything else." So he's like, "Oh, I bet you haven't had a cup of tea this morning." I was like, "No, I haven't, not yet." And anyway, he got the tyre off, and yeah, you got everything else you need. Yeah, I'm fine now. He said, "Is there anything else you need?" I was like, "Well, I could do with a cup of tea." He said, "Give me 10 minutes. And bless him, he cycled off and came back 10 minutes later with a little milk carton with a nice hot cup of milky tea in it. And yeah, you're absolute legend. So mechanics, basics I deal with myself. Anything else you do, you get somebody else to help you, and that's always fine. And yeah, I've never had anything really horrific go wrong with my bike. So yeah. The big question, why? I think the main answer I can give to that one is why not? Yeah, I think, in this time, well, certainly right now, travelling abroad isn't really, well, it's probably not the best option. And I think we always get lambasted with sort of all these incredible places overseas you can go and visit. And you actually forget that quite a lot of places you can go and visit that you don't have to fly to, you don't have to go to an airport and get on a plane and worry about luggage. You can just jump on a train or just cycle there, or jump in a car if you have that. And so many places in the UK and Europe as well that are worth exploring and worth seeing. So yeah, you don't need to go far. I love travelling by bicycle because most of the roads you travel on as a cyclist are the little roads, the little back roads, which have probably been there for centuries. So they would have been originated for people walking, riding, going in carriages. So going along on a bike is far more realistic to how they were first imagined, rather than just racing by in a car. When you're on a bike, you don't just go to the big places that you want, the big tourist places, the honeypot sites. You go to all the little places in between. You stop at these random little villages which don't get a lot of visitors, and they're slightly more interested to see you and talk to you. Yeah, and it just makes it a lot more fun. And yeah, I like a challenge. And then when you get to the top of a hill and you've cycled up a massive hill and there's an incredible view, it feels so much better when you've actually earned that view and got the rush of endorphins and having used so much energy as well. Plans for other named name rides, so Easter Bunny. I've got a few more, so I want to do all the Hope rides. I could also you can do Lost to Found. Lost is a village somewhere up north, I can't remember where, I'm afraid. And then there's a place called Found, it's actually a bar down in Hackney Wick, so Lost and Found. I found you can do one where you go to places named after the surnames of all the Bond actors, which is an unusual one. What other ones are there that I'm planning to do? Those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head right now. But yeah, there'll be a few more.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen, indeed. I like when you answer the question, why not? And you say you go through little places and stuff you don't see in cars. I agree entirely. Cycling is about the journey.
Yes.
It's less about the destination, isn't it? And that's why I love touring myself. But yes, by the way, everybody, I'm not Helen. That's Helen. I'm Greg. No, I look like Helen, but it's not true.
Yes.
Do we have any more final questions before we sort of wrap this up? I think I've asked a few, and I think I'm okay. I think Gary asked one about logistics, which is one of the key ones I was going to ask, but I think you answered that quite well. And also about the rides you're planning, which sounds fantastic. I guess one more question from me is, you've always been a cyclist? Have you always been a cyclist? Was there did you suddenly come back, oh, cycling sounds a lot of fun?
Yeah, so I cycled a bit when I was a child, because everyone does. And then I think I didn't really cycle much at all until probably about 2012 when I moved to London. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I moved to London because of some offhand comments someone made about how much fun it was to cycle in London. And I'd been living in Manchester, and I'd been sort of driving on 3 motorways to get to work every day. So I was like, right, I'll move to London, I'll get a job where I can just cycle there and cycle all over London. And that just sparked the bug. And yeah.
Getting in with the London cyclists, I've done that as well. That is very inspirational. I mean, very, very inspirational, some of them. Okay, any more final questions before we say goodbye? And thank you very much, Helen. I would love to say this. Thank you, Helen. You've been absolutely great. Really interesting, really entertaining. Sorry?
It's a real pleasure.